Hi, my name is Carl Swensson. I'm from Stockbridge, Georgia. I have a computer company, hardware, software, sales and service. I've been doing that for about 22 years. Never really been taken off of my game until I found out that we had the possibility of a president entering the White House that was not eligible to be there. Ever since I started getting involved in this, I knew that this was the job of both myself and other Americans to make sure that the story got told, even if Congress was unwilling to do anything, if the courts were unwilling to do anything, and if our judiciary would not listen. Well, they haven't. And what's worse, they have put people in jail, including myself, for attempting to bring this issue forward. So I'm going to have to start at the very beginning. And the very beginning was when Barack Obama announced his candidacy. Now, I've had many people say, well, that's just a racist comment. The first black man. And you want to deny him the presidency. No, his color never came up. And I'm not going to allow anybody to tell me that I'm to be labeled a racist. I looked at the man. I looked at the circumstances surrounding the man. And they didn't look good. I met through the internet someone called Orly Tates. She's a dogged fighter, let there be no doubt. And she will fight to the very end. I'm quite certain of that. I read a lot of her evidence. I read evidence submitted by many other people, Susan Daniels, Mario Apuzzo, you name it, from all over the country. And it was collated into a package that I knew needed to get out. And it was all put in a very concise, laid out form by Ms. Tates in the form of a letter to Eric Holder. Nothing was done with that by anybody that saw it, including Eric Holder. So I decided to convene a grand jury. Constitutional, common law, citizen grand jury. That occurred on March 26th in 2009. 25 people got together. Oh, I remember that. It was a rainy day, and I didn't know if the full complement would actually show up in Stockbridge, Georgia, which is where we convened it. But come they did from all over the state. And we reached the number precisely at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And at that point, we went into a room that was set up as a jury room in my office building. And at that point, we made contact with Ms. Tates. And we did a video, or not a video, but a phone conference with her. And that phone conference, she was able to put forth all of the evidence to these members, who were all duly sworn in. They were checked for their credentials. We had a notary public there, and I was elected foreman of that particular grand jury. Everything was done by the book. We looked at the evidence, and after hearing it and debating the pros and cons of what we were about to do, it was voted on unanimously that Barack Hussein Obama was guilty of mail fraud, wire fraud, campaign fraud. And that's what our presentment was all about. At that point, the results of our grand jury went viral across the internet, and many people called me wanting to do the same thing. Ohio, Illinois, both worked with me to convene their own. And over the Next month, they did just that. They got the required numbers, and then they also came up with the presentments, same presentments. They used the same evidence. Orly Taste was involved with their grand juries as well. At that point, it became necessary for me to now take these presentments to the authorities to get them to respond. And while I was doing that, someone that had a saxophone company out in Arizona and was currently over in China decided that he wanted to get in on this and do the same thing. And he started something called the American Grand Jury. Bob Campbell. He called me and asked if he could take my idea and push it forward on the national scene and convene more of these grand juries. I gave him approval and helped where I could. He ended up convening 10, maybe 11 more, one of which was a super grand jury. All of this done online, by the way, and all highly secure. The super grand jury consisted of over 150 people. In each and every case, they came up with presentments that said there is reasonable cause to investigate the charge of fraud, and at that time, the added charge of treason. Now, the treason charge came from one Lieutenant Commander Walter Francis Fitzpatrick. He had leveled the charge to the Central District U.S. Attorney in Tennessee. I don't know, I think it was out of Knoxville, Mr. Fitzgerald. And as soon as Mr. Fitzgerald received Commander Fitzpatrick's, by the way, Lieutenant Commander is retired. Once he had received it, he decided that he was going to send some people over to talk to Walter. Those people happened to be FBI and Secret Service. Because he had leveled the charge, they wanted to make sure that Walter was not a threat. A story that was repeated many, many times after that. Yes, the Secret Service came to visit me. Yes, the FBI came to visit me. They wanted to make sure that I was not a threat to the president. Well, you have to define threat, because I was threatening him with the truth, but not physical harm. And that's all any of us have been doing, is threatening to expose the truth. And that very truth is the thing that has been completely ignored and demonized by the mainstream media. It's been quite a journey. And that journey has taken me from Washington to Jekyll Island, making sure that everybody that I could talk to was aware of what the situation was. And the situation is, and was, that we know absolutely nothing about the history and the background of one Barack Obama. We never have. As soon as he got into office, he sealed his records, making sure that we couldn't find out. And to date, those records are still sealed. People are still hiding. And he is still in the Oval Office. Now, getting back to the journey. The journey really took me on April 1st up to, and this is April 1st of the following year in 2010, after having done all these travels across the nation. The journey took me up to Monroe County, Tennessee, where Lieutenant Commander Fitzpatrick had been making every attempt possible to get this information before a sitting grand jury. They did not want to allow that to occur. They, meaning the judiciary in Monroe County, Tennessee. They thought it was frivolous. They thought that he was just a madman. And the papers up there demonized him. That's just what they do. Character assassination, run rampant. Anybody associated with him, including myself, same thing. But he was not to be deterred, much like Orly Dates, a dogged fighter. So I went up there on April 1st, where he was to do a citizen's arrest. And he informed me that that citizen's arrest was based on the fact that in this county, and that's all he was dealing with, was Monroe County, the judges up there had been keeping one grand jury foreman on the payroll. And he was a grand jury foreman for over 20 consecutive years. Now, I don't know about you folks, but last time I checked, when you have a grand jury, foreman is taken from the grand jury, a pool of people that are randomly selected from your county. But it doesn't work that way in that jurisdiction. The law in Tennessee says that it's supposed to work that way. The Constitution in Tennessee says it's supposed to work that way. But the judges really aren't concerned with the Constitution. Now, do you hear me on this, Congress? They're not concerned with the Constitution. Well, we are. So, on this day, April 1st, 2010, Commander Fitzpatrick put forth the paperwork to do the citizen's arrest, not just of the foreman, but of the judge that assigned him, Ross, a Sheriff Bebb, the DA, Colonel Sanders, the DA, the clerk of court, everybody that was involved, and last but not least, the grand jury foreman himself. And he started on this day by having a few of us show up to report on it and made sure he had witnesses. And he went inside the courtroom after having gone to the clerk of court and submitting all of the documentation necessary to perform a citizen's arrest. That morning, prior to him going in, two people, myself included, called the local police and said, "You might want to get down to the courthouse because a citizen's arrest is going on." I don't know how much more by the book you can get. Citizen's arrests are allowed in Tennessee, as they are in many places across this land. And if we are to be minimalized so much as to be both ignored, chastised, thrown off our property, which was the courthouse, and then arrested for doing our duty as citizens, Houston, we have a problem. So Commander Fitzpatrick goes in and does a citizen's arrest. The people involved that were witnesses stayed outside of the courtroom, documenting, videoing, and watching as the commander was escorted out of the courtroom, first by the bailiff and then by a deputy sheriff. This particular sheriff happened to be on the arrest list. He was also arrested via citizen's arrest, not taken into custody though. They thought Commander Fitzpatrick was just off of his rocker. So they just played along. But he was not to be deterred. And he kept after it. So eventually we were ushered out of the courtroom, out of the courthouse, and onto the courthouse steps, where discussions ensued on what their job was, what the job of the police and the sheriffs was. And it was to take them into custody. They said, "Where will we take them?" Commander Fitzpatrick said, "Where do you take criminals? You take them to the jail. It's right over there. You know, right over there." They refused to do so. And in the meantime, the sheriff was absolutely apoplectic. So he was talking to the judge involved in this, Judge Ross. And Judge Ross could take it no more, and finally faxed over some handwritten instructions to have Commander Fitzpatrick arrested. Arrested for interrupting a meeting. Arrested Let me turn this thing off. Forgot it was there. Okay. Arrested for rioting. Arrested for interrupting a meeting. And there was one other charge that escapes me right now, but it really doesn't matter. What does matter is that they took this man into custody right then and there, escorted him down the courthouse steps, and then, I'm not going to say through, but forcibly put him up against a car. He did not do anything to resist, and yet they will also throw in later resisting arrest. And then literally hauled him, carried him to the very same jail that this person, this grand jury foreman, was destined to go. At that point, another uproar on the internet. The injustice of this. Again, Congress, if the people do not have the right to exert some control over their local government, we have no rights at all. You took an oath. You took an oath to protect us, to protect our Constitution, to protect your Constitution from your state, from the United States of America. Not all caps, by the way. And you're failing woefully to do that. Meanwhile, people all over this country are suffering because they're trying to do the right thing, as Commander Fitzpatrick suffered. He was arrested and spent about 6 days in jail on these charges before they finally released him. While we were there, we could not even find out what the charges were. They wouldn't give us any. So the NDAA was in effect in Tennessee before you ever passed the bill. You just made it official. So here we go. Now he's in the system. And now he's going to have to go for his arraignment. His arraignment was going to be April 20th. People across the internet knew that this was going to occur. The authorities knew that this was going to occur. They heard the chatter. And the chatter was that a lot of people were going to be gathering on that day to show support for Commander Fitzpatrick. And they extrapolated out from that an angry mob was going to be taking over the courthouse. Well, that never occurred. It wasn't designed to occur. It was never talked about. with all the people that were there. Save one. God bless him. Darren Huff. Darren Huff came up on that day, and he exerted his Second Amendment rights to carry his weapon with him. In this case, weapons. Yeah, in the tool chest of his truck, he did have an AK. He did. On his side, he had a pistol. He did. For his own protection. He also had a legal carry permit, which is recognized by several surrounding states to Georgia. There was nothing illegal about this day. But apparently some mention by Darren to a group of bankers when he was trying to cash a check led the authorities to believe that there was going to be a riot. There was going to be some sort of civil unrest in the city of Madisonville in Monroe County on this day. So as I got off the expressway, Darren Huff was right behind me in his truck, which was decked out in "Don't Tread on Me," militia stuff, and a big flag. He was proud. He was proud. And as soon as he got off the expressway, onto the highway leading into Sweetwater and then Madisonville, it looked like Christmas, except there were no red lights. It was all blue and white. They came from every angle. I saw this in my rearview mirror. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I immediately turned off into a gas station. And when I turned into the gas station, curiously enough, there was a unmarked SUV that pulled directly in front of me, as if to stop me. I wasn't carrying any weapons, and I'm not concerned with what they're doing. So I tried to go around them, and I did. And they just saw the blue lights now happening on the road below them. So they quickly turned around and headed for the action. I, in turn, got to a vantage point where I could videotape the whole thing. And I did. They knew I was there. It lasted about 45 minutes, where they did a felony stop on him. Had him get out of the truck, walk backwards, disarm himself. They took his gun, and then they did what I guess anybody would do in a felony stop. They checked everything that they could. He did not give them approval to check his vehicle, but he did tell them what was in there. They sent over bomb and drug sniffing dogs, and those proved that there was nothing there. He was fine. So they let him go, but before they let him go, they gave him his gun back. And when they gave him his gun back, they said, "We'd like you to do one thing for us. When you get into Madisonville, take your gun out and put it into the tool chest of your truck." Now Darren said, "Are you going to be there? Are there going to be police people there?" I said, "Why, yes, of course." He said, "Well, then there's no need, because you're there to protect us." So at that point, he took his gun back out of the holster and put it into the tool chest of his truck and proceeded on in. I stopped filming and met him at a CVS on the same road, where he was a little nervous and shaken by this experience, to say the least. But we were not deterred. We were a little late getting there, but we got there nonetheless. And in the process of going there, I've never seen so many agencies, alphabet agencies, for lack of a better term. Who knows who all these people were? But they were in driveways. Seemed like every other driveway going down the highway, there was an unmarked, here was an unmarked, and they were poking their heads out like turtles and then going back in. Curious it was, very curious. They were behind us. They were in front of us. We weren't worried because we weren't doing anything illegal. Got into Madisonville. And as we get into the city of Madisonville, oh my goodness, there were so many unmarked, marked, and people with assault weapons. But yeah, it was all with the police, clearly on display. Snipers on rooftops and windows, helicopters flying overhead. There was one estimate that there was almost 200 such people, enforcement people there. We were later told that FBI, State Patrol, sheriffs, city police, SWAT teams, everybody, they were expecting something really massive to occur that never occurred. We were there to support Commander Fitzpatrick in what he was doing and to try and make light of the fact that the man has done nothing wrong. Nothing. Well, it ended without incident. He was arraigned and given another court date. Came over to, Commander Fitzpatrick, that is, came over to this little restaurant across from the courthouse. The restaurant's name was Donna's. Very nice little place with good people inside, where he addressed the crowd of people that had showed up and told them what had gone on. That was it. That's all there was that day. We peacefully gathered. Heck, we even offered some of those plain patrol cars, SUVs, went up to them and offered them donuts and whatever, coffee. Of course they refused, but we offered. Is this the action of dangerous people? I don't think so. Congress. The only reason we're dangerous is because we're armed with the truth. And in the process of all of this, all of these people and people across the internet are being made aware of what's happening. And what was happening there was twofold. The issue of Obama's eligibility was not being addressed, not by the media, not by the local law enforcement, not by the federals, the FBI. Nobody with jurisdiction could allow this to occur. And Congress, you were summarily served with all of the documentation that proves that the people, including myself and Commander Fitzpatrick, were right. And you continue to this day. You continue to this day to ignore this. I don't know what it takes. I used to think that by getting things out into the public, by airing it out, that would be enough. And the truth would come out. Not so. Not so. Later that week, a group of us got together and decided we can't let him just go without some support. We must at least attempt to get some of the sheriffs in surrounding counties to do what the sheriff in that county would not, what the FBI would not, do and complete the citizen's arrest. So it was agreed that the one man that wasn't working at the time, Darren Huff, was going to return back up to Tennessee. Wow. That proved to be a very bad mistake because they were waiting. Darren made it as far as 2 other jurisdictions, 2 other sheriffs on his way to Knoxville, which was about 35, 40 miles north of Monroe County. At which time he was stopped as was all traffic on Interstate 75, while they pulled him over, did another felony stop, and then arrested him and took him to jail. Why this time? Well, they used an obscure federal law from the 60s, called it transporting firearms across state lines for the purpose of insurrection, taking over a government building. But they hadn't used that in almost 50 years. But use it they did this time. And anytime you've got a federal DA that wants you arrested, you will be arrested. You will be charged. And you will go to trial. Nobody involved with this ever thought, for one moment, that the government would go this far and make an example out of Mr. Huff. But they did. They arrested him for these weapons charges, and also he was arrested for the same charges that Commander Fitzpatrick was arrested on. A lot of us thought that was curious, since he was merely a witness to what Commander Fitzpatrick was doing. But they threw those charges in. And he had to deal with that as well. And those charges came up first. Now, I was there for his federal trial, and first one was his arraignment. I think it was in October of 2010. And I went to the federal courthouse where he was having his arraignment. And it was rather odd. It was surrealistic. I felt like I was in that Star Wars bar scene. These strange-looking cast of characters were intimately glued to their laptop screens. So impersonal, including the judge. Everybody was wired in. All of the evidence was put forward by the district attorney, Mackey, I believe his name is. And at the end of it all, Mackey turned and looked at me. And he seemed aghast that I was even there. But nothing occurred. But I knew that something was up. They kept on pursuing Darren, and they would eventually arrest him for these charges. They would eventually incarcerate him for those charges. The next go-around was the actual motions hearing. At that hearing, which happened, I believe it was January of 2011, I again showed up, but this time suspecting that maybe something might happen. I made sure I had cash. I made sure I went up with a friend so that I didn't get my vehicle stranded there. And lo and behold, at the end of the motions hearing, right outside the federal courtroom doors, I was arrested by federal marshals. Not on weapons charges, but on the same charges that Commander Fitzpatrick was arrested. I waited in the holding cell at the federal courthouse for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And they transported me back down to the wonderful Madisonville Hilton. I'm sure that Commander Fitzpatrick has other names for it, but folks, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. Gratefully, the person that I had with me went immediately to Madisonville, knowing exactly what was going to occur. He put forth my bail money, and they booked me in, and then basically released me because bail had already been met. So it was a very short stay inside their hotel. And now I was in the system. Congress, I hope you're proud of yourselves. I really do. Because you've ensnared yet another by your inaction. How many others will you allow this to happen to? Hardworking, small businessmen, retired, citizens who care deeply for this country, who care deeply for the Constitution, who care deeply for their families and God. How many of them are you willing to sacrifice to keep your power base going, to keep your buddies in the media off your backs, to keep your buddies in Washington off your backs? What are you doing there? You're not doing our business. You're doing your own. Try doing our business for a change. Try adhering to your oath of office. Do you remember taking that? Many of us do. Many of us have been present when our elected signed and swore allegiance to this nation and to the Constitution. Sometimes I wonder if what Bush said isn't true. Thanks to your efforts, Congress. That the Constitution is just a piece of paper. Well, it may be to you guys, but it's not to America. And one day there will be hell to pay. Because as people awaken from this slumber, you will have to atone for these egregious violations of the public trust. Anyway, I played around for the next 2 months in the system, working with a court-appointed attorney. I was ready to defend myself. They would have no part of that. I told them exactly what I was going to do and what I was going to go after. And I guess they just wanted to make a statement, a point, that I could be controlled. That the state of Tennessee, through and by its representatives in Monroe County, through the judges, through the police, sheriffs, could do as they will. And that is where we are today. Our legal system is broken. Our judiciary is broken. Our legislators have no spine, and they have no allegiance to the people who put them there. That is the message. When are you going to get it and stand up for what's right? Or are you more interested in pushing this nation over a cliff of socialism, with your Pied Piper being no less than Barack Obama? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misspoke. Is it Barry Soetoro? Is it Boonell? What is his name? Can somebody up there please tell me? Can you tell me how he wound up getting a Social Security number that was from Connecticut when he was out in Hawaii? I know. It's just a typo, right? Yeah, that's what you keep saying. And a birth certificate that was proven to be a forgery, put on display, and still on display for America to see. Is this a joke? Because it sure seems like you're not taking any of this very seriously. What I see is the biggest crime against this country ever that I can think of. The power grab by Roosevelt in 1933, the inception of the Federal Reserve back in the 1800s, the central bank. You know, lots of bad things have happened to this country. 16th, 17th Amendments, very bad things. designed to take away our freedom, to make us slaves again. But this one was the worst, because they took our president from us. It'll come back. It'll come back to haunt you at some point in the not too distant future, because as he works his magic in destroying this great nation through Obamacare, through these games with taxes, through the loss of jobs overseas due to the actions of Congress, there's nothing left. Many will say that we're still the greatest nation on earth. And on paper, that may be so. But how great is a man if he owes many times more than what he makes? How great is the man? That man is the country. That man is you. Personally, I don't think that's greatness at all. I think all it takes is cunning, lying, cheating, morally bankrupt actions that will continue until there is nothing left. So I got away from the charge that was dropped. They did a nolo prosequi, which means they refused to prosecute me. And all I could do was continue to support Commander Fitzpatrick from afar as he spent time in and out of jail, having people absolutely destroy him both physically, mentally, any way they could. And he's still fighting to this day. Tennessee has made it such that their statement was, Mr. Swensson, we don't much want you around here anymore. I got the message. Got the message. It's kind of tough for me to maintain my business and just maintain when I'm in a jail up in Tennessee. So all I can do is support and make people aware of what's going on there and what has gone on in Monroe County, Tennessee. While I still fight to get someone to look at the usurpation of the presidency. So after the charges were dropped, I continued to work, as I had been, within the Republican Party in my county. I was living in Clayton County. My office is in Stockbridge. And, excuse me, for the life of me, I could not and cannot understand how people that I consider to be fellow Republicans, that's at the state level on down, could not consider that the presidential elections might have been different had the truth ever come out, had Congress ever done its job, had these judges, had these district attorneys, had these DAs ever done their job. None did. And the Republican Party didn't either. You know what their answer was? Don't worry about it. We'll get him in the next election. To a man. I can't tell you how many congressmen I've spoken to, how many senators I've spoken with. Yeah, they say the same thing. Hey, you saw the birth certificate. He was born here. Without once considering, even considering, what the term natural born citizen really meant. They didn't. You don't. And the Congressional Research Service has made it such that you have what you consider to be an answer. And the answer is, if you're born on this soil, guess what? You're a natural born citizen. Just like every illegal alien that comes across our border and drops a kid on our soil. You, our elected, are telling us that the Constitution is saying that that child dropped on our soil from illegal aliens, regardless of where they're from, is eligible to be President of the United States. That's what you're saying. And that's what you have. And that's why this country is going down right now. And I don't know what it's going to take to bring it back. But it's not going to come back via any actions through the presidency. And apparently it's not going to come back through any actions of the Congress, because my Republicans refuse to do anything but acquiesce. Acquiesce to the Democrats. What a strange world we live in. Bill, where do we go from here? I have fought. I have fought and I've fought and I've fought, and no one will at least give us the time of day. I'm not alone. Others have fought and continue the fight. But when everybody in the Republican Party says, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Let's just worry about the next election. Okay, I was worried about the next election, did all the things a good Republican county chairman, which is what I am, was supposed to do. Try and get out the vote, try and work towards changing things from within. And the harder I worked, the more everything remained the same. The harder I worked, the more everything remained the same. Folks, we do have a problem. And that problem is that America has not fully awakened. The heart and soul of this country has not exerted what we need to do. We need to take it back. We need to do what Iceland did. We need to get rid of the bankers. We have every commodity here in this country without having to be an island unto ourselves. We have every commodity to be, first, self-sufficient. Second, take care of everybody in this country. And third, to look beyond our borders for new business. We have all that. But we don't have the will, the strength, or the desire to bring back the one tool that our founders gave us to make that happen. And that's the Constitution. So, the last thing I did, I like jumping around. Fast forward, fast back. Last thing I did was to take the information I had and try and challenge Obama at the state level for his eligibility to be on our ballot. Myself and several others did this. It was an exercise in futility, because once again, political payback, legislative chicanery, and judicial malfeasance, misconduct, and downright thievery allowed for the candidate Obama to appear on our ballot, even though at the administrative law challenge hearing, his side never even bothered to show up. None of his legal team showed up. We had the same thing. That you've seen before Dirty Harry putting out a chair. It was an empty chair. That's what we had to deal with. And you know what? The empty chair held more sway over Judge Malihi at the administrative law hearing than the people of this country and of this state. He acted as the defense for the empty chair and summarily dismissed our petition, our challenge, not just mine, not just mine. So, that went its course. David Weldon pursued that course all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it was thrown out by the Supreme Court. So there you have it. The judiciary is in league with the devil. Do you hear me? In league with the devil. Now, I know you guys don't believe in the devil because you must be godless. If you were not godless, then you would have to have God in you. And if you had God in you, you would have the Constitution in you because the Constitution was found on moral and godly principles. Congress, when you run for that seat, you tell everybody how godly and how moral you are. And when you get inside the Beltway, you prove how morally corrupt, intelligently bankrupt, and despicable that you really are. You take every opportunity to deny our freedoms, our constitutional rights given by God, not by the Constitution, but by God. And I don't know how long you plan on denying God, but as long as you do, He's going to deny this country His blessings. And we will see where that goes, but it's not going to be a good place. I think that's about all I need to say here. There are many more particulars that, if anybody's interested, they can find out by reaching out to me. I'll be happy to pass along whatever information you'd like concerning the events that led up to this. Again, my name is Carl Swensson. I have a computer company in Stockbridge, Georgia. You can reach me at 678-438-6138, and my email address is carl@cassmanpc.com. I have always been open, always accessible, and I will continue to be so. Congress, anytime you want to talk, I've got a little to say.